Welcome to the Vintage Ballers podcast. I'm your host, Brad Coreno. And on today's episode, we have Mike Gosling joining the show. Mike was a pitcher for Stanford University, where he pitched in a national championship game back in the early 2000s before being drafted by the Arizona Diamondbacks in 2001 and making his major league debut in 2004. Mike pitched on and off for 5 years in Major League Baseball, including with the Cleveland Indians. So without further ado, please welcome Mike Gosling. For starting, Mike, I want to give a shout out to Mooch, Brett Muchet, for making this happen. And tell us, like, how did you meet Mooch, and how far back did your friendship go?
Well, I just met him about a year ago. I had not basically touched a baseball for about 10 years since retiring in 2010. I played catch with my son a little bit, but didn't do anything more than that. And a little over a year ago, I was coaching my son in Little League, actually, just helping out and watching, and thought, man, that looks fun. He's so lucky he gets to be out there playing. All I get to do is help and coach and sit in the dugout here, but he's out there pitching and competing, having fun. I thought, I really want to do that again. Is there a way that I can do that again? So I looked up North County San Diego men's baseball leagues, and sure enough, there was one available. And so I filled out an online form to try to join a team. I didn't know where it was in the season. The end of the online form, it makes you put the highest level that you played. And I thought, oh no, I'm gonna have to put major leagues, and then people's expectations are gonna be way higher than I deserve. But I didn't want to not put it, and then they find out, and then it looks like I'm sandbagging them. So I put it, and then about 7 a.m. the next morning, I got a call from somebody saying, hey, want to join our team? And I did, and Brett just happened to be on that team. Luck of the draw that I got a really nice group of guys. And so some take it more seriously than others, but it's fun. It's 35 and over. Good enough baseball that we expect, for the most part, it to be competitive and plays to be made, but also we all recognize that we're old and out of shape and don't do this for a living. And so if we just totally botch one here and there, also part of the deal. So it's a lot of fun. It gets my competitive juices going again. So I like it a lot.
Mike, how did you train to get back into pitching like that? Because obviously that's not pitching for 10 years and then going back and pitching at a fairly high level now. I mean, you're competing against the guys who probably, some of them are former players and former minor league players. Like, how did you get to the point where how long did it take you to get back in shape?
Well, let's start with the fact that I never got back in shape. I should have. I still mean to. I still think, okay, this time between outings, I'm going to throw and do some arm exercises. The fact of the matter is I had a little bit of throwing strength just from playing catch with my son and coaching Little League. But really, I didn't have much. And I just thought, we'll see what happens. It's possible I go out there and it's just too much. It's too sore. And I also thought this might just be too ugly. I might just be, such a shell of my former self, which wasn't that great to begin with. Let's be honest, that I can't even stomach watching it. But so I did do some arm exercises. We bought a bounce back net for our backyard. So I threw in the backyard a little bit, and then I just thought, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And I mean, it's far from what it used to be. I get sore so quickly. Places in my body get sore now that never used to get sore when I was a younger guy and actually trained for this. But it's a lot of fun, and I can make it through, 4 or 5 innings. I went 7 innings one day, which was a big accomplishment for me. But then it really does. It takes me a full week to be able to recover. And I pretty much don't throw a ball during that time because I go back to my day job here, and then go out and try it again. But hey, it's been going okay so far. I think the team likes having me on the mound when I'm up there. So it's good. And it satisfies that craving for competition. I'm having slightly fewer baseball dreams at night now because of it. So that's a good thing.
Mooch definitely brags about you. And I was going to say with him, like at his age to be a catcher still. And I mean, it's incredible what so I grew up with him. Like he was basically my second brother. Like my older brother and him are best friends. So I grew up, and he was a star. Him and my brother were star athletes back in high school. My brother was a star basketball player, and he was a star baseball player. So I kind of grew up around watching them train and compete. And you know, it would be in the snow, and they'd be playing basketball or football or something. They'd always be doing something. So I watched that. I was 10 years younger than those guys. So I kind of got into my psyche, and I never realized how good they both were until I got older, and I started playing. I'm like, wow, those guys were really good, because they were both Hall of Fame athletes in their, you know, high schools, and went on to play obviously mooch minor leagues. And you know how tough it is just to play in the minors.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, I mean, baseball is such a challenging sport. People don't understand, just to hit a baseball at a high level. I mean, not to mention be a pitcher or anything else you're doing in base. It is such a challenging sport. I mean, I just rewatched Jordan's documentary, and, you know, MJ says, he goes, playing baseball was the most challenging thing I've ever done. You know, even more challenging. Like basketball, I had that down. It was, baseball is the most challenging sport, because it's so hard to hit at a high level. So, you know, it's just, you know, when I look at guys like you and Mooch, and I've had several guys on this podcast, many who played in the minors, some major league players, and, you know, just to see how far you guys have come is incredible to me. Because I played, you know, I didn't play in high school, but I played up until that point, and I was a pretty decent pitcher. I didn't want to. I quit sports freshman year of high school. But long story short, I have so much appreciation for anybody who can take it not only through high school, but college, minor leagues, and then the majors. I mean, that's, you know, I know you kind of downplayed yourself, but I don't think you understand how you have to be the elite of the elite just to get to the majors. You know, not to mention, you know, stay there, or even pitch in a game. So, I mean, what you did, not many people will ever do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, you know, when I step back, I do recognize that. And, you know, I realize that to keep advancing level by level, you have to be, you know, one of the top people at that level. And, you know, if that gets you, if you're a top little leaguer, that gets you to a travel team. If you're a top travel team player, it gets you to your high school team. If you're, you know, top high school, it gets you to college. But each time you start over and you join that bigger pool, and all of a sudden the players from, you know, 1 on the roster to 25 on the roster are a step better than they were. And so you kind of have to keep advancing, and it is difficult because it keeps funneling down. And what I found is the hardest part once you get up to that top level is staying there, because you've got that whole wave of people who are doing this all behind you, and they're all coming, and there are a lot of people for very few spots. And so if you're not performing at the upper levels, they'll find somebody else who will. And I think the people who are quote unquote no names in the major leagues, but stick around for 8 years, 10 years, 12 years. I mean, that is incredible to me, that so many people are looking for those jobs. The front office is, you know, quick to replace somebody who's not producing with all the talent that's coming up in the minor leagues. And if you can hold on to one of those coveted spots for, you know, 8, 10, 12 years, that's incredible. And I think sometimes the casual fan thinks, oh, that guy was never an all-star, you know, sort of a forgettable name. But, you know, as you were saying, that just indicates that they were, you know, absolutely elite, and not just, you know, for a moment, not just at the very peak for a second and then came back down, but, you know, continuously, and able to hold on to it for that long. It's an incredible testament to talent and perseverance and everything that they do to do that for as long as they do.
No question, Mike. And I think the people who do say that obviously have never played sports or never played at a high level. And I hate to say that, but that's just I mean, anybody that played at a high level would know better. You know, they know what it takes to get to those levels. And, you know, I feel like a lot of the fans who say that just never played at that level, or just don't have an appreciation for it.
Yeah, that's probably true. And I think it does take, you know, being in the grind to some degree to see what it really is. And to recognize that, you know, when you're trying to get to that spot, especially in the major leagues, there's really not much margin for error. You know, you have a few bad games, until you've established yourself, you're back down in the minor leagues. And then you've got to get yourself going back in the minor leagues and press enough again that the front office thinks, okay, here's a person we want to give another chance to. And more importantly, we want to give another chance to above, you know, somebody else. And when you're in the major leagues, there's nowhere to hide, because if you struggle for a few outings, you know, you're going to be down, and you can't really take time and tinker with things and try a new pitch and let me adjust my mechanics here, or, you know, do something a little bit different there, because the competition's just too good. Nobody's going to take their foot off the gas and say, "Oh, I know Mike's working on a few things. Let me take it easy." No, that's when they're really going to pounce. So the people who are able to stay in the major leagues, go through the ups and downs, make the adjustments in a major league setting, with the spotlight on them, I think that's incredibly impressive, because I think there are so many times that people, at that level just wish they could say, hold on, time out. Let me just pause for about 3 weeks. Let me go throw some bullpens. Let me work with my pitching coach. I think I can figure this out. I'll come back. I'll be ready to go. But you don't have that luxury unless you're getting sent down to the minor leagues. You've got to figure it out as you're competing, as your team's still relying on you, banking on you, as you're still going up against the best hitters in the world. So that's a really tough thing to do.
And Mike, as a pitcher in the off season, for example, like how many months of your arm need a rest for?
Everybody's different. I would normally take about a month off just totally of throwing, and then start from square one. So first day would be, a series of arm exercises, probably no throwing, and all the time I'm running, lifting weights for lower body, trying to keep my core strong, because that's important for pitching. But when it comes to arm stuff, start back at the beginning, arm exercises on day one, day two, same thing, but a little bit more, building up strength before you even get to the point where you're touching a baseball. Then you get touch a baseball and, it's 25 throws from 45 feet. I mean, short, little distance, but just a little bit. The next day, a little bit more, take a day off the next day. So you're really every year, I think, for most guys, just giving yourself a chance to fully shut down, recover, because it's a long season, whether you're in the minor leagues or the major leagues, and just get that rest physically, mentally, everything. And then just build it right back up from square one. And there's really no reason to rush it. You've got a long enough off season that you'd rather plan it out, figure exactly what you need to do to be ready on day one at spring training, which is the goal. Spring training, certainly when I played, and especially now, is not a time to get back in shape. It's the time to show up in shape and show that you're ready to go for the season. So you start with day one of spring training, you work backwards, and you just figure out a plan to build yourself up so that you're in peak form as you show up to Florida or Arizona to get the season going.
I mean, Mike, I can't imagine what it's like to have to face some of these lineups in the major leagues. I mean, it's bad enough in the minor leagues, there's a ton of talent, but then you go to the majors, and growing up in Cleveland, we saw the 95 Indians who had, Kenny Lofton, Vizquel, Baerga, Albert Bell, Tomey, Ramirez, Paul Sorrento, Sandy Alomar, Eddie Murray. I mean, some of these guys are Hall of Famers. I mean, if it wasn't for the steroids, probably 7 of them or 6 of them would be Hall of Famers. So you're talking Manny and Tomey at 6 to 7 in the lineup. I mean, that was how crazy that lineup was. How would you, as a pitcher, how do you even approach a lineup like that? And I know you faced some good ones in your day. Like, what do you do against those power lineups that you have nowhere to hide?
As hard as it is, you just have to do your best not to look at the name on the back of the jersey. You know who it is. Nobody's, if people tell you, "Oh, that was Albert Pujols, I just got out, I didn't realize." I mean, come on, you know who's in the box, you know who's on deck, but you have to go through a process on the mound where you turn your attention from, "Oh my goodness, this is Albert Pujols," to, "Okay, my catcher called a fastball away. I need to throw a fastball with conviction. I need to hit the corner. It needs to be at the knees." That's true whether it's, Joe Schmo up there, or that's true whether it's Albert Pujols up there. And you just honestly have to have a little bit of blind faith that a good pitch is going to work even against a hitter that good. Because if you start thinking about all the pitches that a person like Albert Pujols can hit, you're going to run out of options really quickly, because he can hit fastball any 4 corners. He can hit curveball. It doesn't have to be a bad one. He can just sniff it out and hit it. I mean, and guys are that way. And so if you start playing the, what can I throw here? Who's on deck? Do I have a better chance with that guy than this guy? I think it can snowball on you really quickly. And I certainly fell into that. I think everybody falls into that. That's one of the biggest challenges of pitching at that level, is not falling into that. But the guys who are in the flow, and me when I was pitching my best, was, okay, I recognize that, it's Miguel Cabrera up there, got that. Now what am I going to do to try to get this hitter out? And okay, catcher called fastball in. I'm going to, throw my best fastball with my most conviction. I'm going to hit the inside corner. I'm going to take my chances, Miguel Cabrera or not. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. With the Stars, it works less than with others. But there's really no other way to try to compete against those guys than just to bring it back to within yourself, what you can do. And you got to hope that, at least on your good days, that's enough.
And Mike, I look back at some of the great pitchers throughout MLB history, and one of my buddies' name is Todd. His dad is Burt Blyleven, who is top 5 in strikeouts all time and great curveball. So we talk about this kind of stuff too, and it's interesting to go back and forth. But for me, and I think if you're a few years older than I am, I remember Pedro in like 98, Pedro Martinez from 98 to probably 01 or 02 was about as unhittable of any pitcher I've ever seen in MLB history, at least in my 30 years of watching it. In your perspective, being that you were a major league pitcher yourself, who are the guys you marveled at in the past 20, 30 years that you thought that guy's incredible?
Well, he's one. Randy Johnson's one, obviously. I mean, just a different person, different animal. 6'10", basically sidearm, throwing gas. Lefties are scared to death to stay in there. Devastating slider. Those are the kind of guys that are just on a different plane. I mean, they're playing a different game, and they're impressive and really fun to watch. But the people to me that were even more fun to watch were the people who had good stuff, but maybe not just dominant stuff, but still took that good stuff, and with the way they could compete or with how consistent their mechanics were, repeatability, turned that good stuff into just nastiness and incredible results. And 2 guys come to mind for me on that, one of whom I played with in Cleveland. The first, though, is Roy Halladay, who I saw up close and personal when I was in spring training with the Blue Jays one year. His stuff was really good, don't get me wrong, nasty sinker, good cutter. But the way he could locate it and his just determination to make every pitch important and make every pitch his pitch turned, low 90s, sinker, 90 mile an hour or so cutter, curveball into, close to Hall of Fame stuff. And, perfect game and just incredible performances, because he'd take the outside corner and he'd take the inside corner and he'd hit them both. And sometimes it would go this way if it was a cutter, and sometimes it would go that way if it was a sinker. And so if you're a batter, you got to protect both sides of the plate, cutter, sinker, either way. You don't know which direction it's going, but the one thing you do know is it's going to be on the corner. He's not going to leave you something over the middle. And the other guy was Cliff Lee with Cleveland. Again, mix of pitches similar to what I threw, but whereas I would throw, that really nasty curveball 1 out of 5 times that I threw my curveball, if I was lucky, he threw it 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5. Whereas I would dot the corner low and away with a cutter, 2 out of 5 times. If I was lucky, he'd do it 5 out of 5. If you stacked up my bet, and this comes off maybe as tooting my own horn, it's the opposite. But if you stacked up my best stuff against his stuff, on my very best day, my very best fastball was as good as his. On my very best day, my very best curveball was as good as his. On my very best day, my very best cutter was as good as his. But that was my very best day and my very best one. And it happened, but it happened sporadically. For him, it happened over and over and over again. I mean, he'd throw 100 pitches per game, and 90 were basically exactly what he wanted to do with the ball. And to do that over and over and over again is incredible. So it's not the kind of stuff where you just drop your jaw like you do when you're watching Pedro in his heyday, or Randy Johnson, but to sit back and appreciate it, from the bullpen or from the dugout, and know, man, this guy has taken the abilities that he was given and just maximized them to the full potential. I always found that really impressive to watch.
That's a really interesting take on that. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine to a degree, because they weren't like blowing anybody away, but they just hit their spots constantly. I mean, you watch those 2 guys, are like wizards with that. And I remember watching, we all got TBS as a kid, so I would turn on the Braves games and watch them. And I hated them because they beat us in the World Series in '95, but I still wanted to watch them. And those two and Smoltz was a little bit different. He was more of a power guy, but those two guys were just incredible to watch. I mean, how they would pinpoint things, and they were just constantly changing speeds, and it was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, they were, and they made it look so easy that I think there was a stretch there where a lot of people thought, wow, I can do that. Why can't I do that? If Greg Maddux can go out there wearing his glasses and throw 88 and shut everybody down, I can do that. But then you try to do it and you're missing your spots where he's hitting them, and your changeup's not dropping down a foot and a half where his is. So yeah, I mean, incredible, very fun to watch. I do think they would struggle a little more now with the pitch zone, the square showing where every pitch is. I think they got some calls off the corners back in their days, but certainly fun to watch, and just another sort of talent that, it's not the same as the guys who just have athletic ability that'll blow you away, but it's a incredible talent nonetheless.
And I want to take it back to your youth. And you were born in Madison, Wisconsin, correct?
I was, yeah, Midwesterner.
Same here, Cleveland. Did you grow up in Madison, or did you move anywhere else?
I grew up in Madison until just age 11, and then I moved to Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, really? So give us your experiences in both Madison and Salt Lake City.
Sure. Madison, cold, as you know. I love baseball from a young age, but it's a short season. But I think that actually probably served me well, because unlike some kids in California and Arizona who can play all the time and maybe, don't get as excited about it because it's not rare. It's rare in Madison to be able to get out there in the nice weather and play baseball. So all winter long, I would look forward to the day where it was warm enough to go out and start playing catch with my dad. And when that day would come, I'd be out there. And, this was the Midwest back in the late 80s. So there wasn't travel ball. There wasn't personal coaches. It was my dad and me in the alley throwing the baseball back and forth. And so I just sort of figured out how to do it on my own. I played regular old recreational Little League because that was what was offered. We probably had about a 12-game season back then, but I made the most of them. I did that when I was 9 and 10 there. And I just had a sense right from the beginning that for whatever reason, I was able to throw the ball harder than most kids on my team. It didn't translate to fielding and hitting. I was no better than others at that. But the one thing I could do for whatever reason was throw the ball pretty hard. And so that, of course, made me want to be a pitcher, because when you're a kid, you like doing what you're good at. And so I knew pretty much right away that if I was going to go anywhere in baseball, it was going to be as a pitcher. But, as we talked about earlier, when you're the best kid on your Little League team, that doesn't mean much. It's fun. It's certainly something to strive for, but doesn't indicate that you're going to have any chance playing at a higher level. And so I enjoyed it, but, had no idea if that was going to take me anywhere, and then moved to Salt Lake City and kept playing Little League there, 11, 12. Was a good Little League pitcher, threw it by most kids, so I didn't have to work on, breaking pitches or off speed. Didn't throw anything off speed, I don't think, until I was at least 13. And at age 13 and 14, I did struggle a little bit, because I moved from that little field in Little League to the big field that you move to when you're 13. And my body and mechanics just weren't ready for that. So I tried to compensate by really muscling the ball. I liked that feeling of being able to throw it by hitters and from the farther distance between the mound and home plate. I couldn't do that anymore, but I wanted to. So I wrenched it. And that made my elbow hurt, not surprisingly. So I was at a little bit of a crossroads at that age, because I was having a sore arm all the time, which limited my pitching. I was okay as a first baseman and a hitter, but didn't have the same passion for that. And then I got really lucky that a pitching coach by the name of Tom House, who is famous for working with Randy Johnson and Nolan Ryan when Nolan was with the Rangers, and now has a national academy of pitching instructors. He happened to be coming through Utah and doing a little clinic, and my parents signed me up for it without even telling me, I think, which I'm glad they did. And I showed up and I saw him, and over the course of a few days, he gave me some pointers that I'd never heard before. I'd never really had a pitching coach. That didn't necessarily make me better, but they caused my elbow to stop hurting when I threw the ball. And I thought, oh, I can do this again without my elbow constantly hurting. And so I took that and I worked on it. And kind of reignited my passion. I also grew a little bit, and thought, all right, I'll give high school ball a try. And when I did, I started out a pretty mediocre pitcher. And then, long story short, my first outing of my junior year, there was a scout there who was there to see somebody else, not me, but happened to put the radar gun up when I was pitching, and I hit 81. And I thought, oh, pretty good, 81. I'm happy with that. I didn't know I could throw that hard. And by my last game of my junior year, there was a scout there this time to see me, and he put the radar gun up, and I hit 93. So I don't know what happened my junior
Wow.
year, but I gained 12 miles an hour, and that
That's
was when I knew
incredible.
that I would have a chance. Yeah.
My dad always told me when we were younger, lefties have more of like a natural spin to their ball or a natural kind of tail to some of their, did you ever find that to be true?
I don't know. I always heard that too. People always think that lefties have a little more tail on their pitches, so a little bit of run away from a right-handed hitter. Um, I'm not sure if that's true because I feel like some of the best sinker ballers now that we see are right-handers. But for whatever reason, lefties are harder to hit sometimes when you're a kid. I mean, it holds true all the way to the major leagues that lefty is a tough matchup for a lefty batter. But I think as a kid, hitters just aren't used to seeing lefties on the mound as much.
100%.
And so it just throws them off for whatever reason. I don't know if it's the ball's moving more or where it's the release is coming from, but that definitely gave me a little bit of an advantage. And I think it really gave me an advantage against left-handed hitters because they weren't used to seeing it coming, from their hip area and coming in a little bit harder. So I took advantage of it.
Your point about playing little league, for example, I remember facing a buddy of mine. He was a big dude. He was throwing like in the 70s. We were probably like 11 or 12, and he was gunning in there. And he was a lefty. I was a righty, and I got a double off him just on sheer luck. I just put the bat out there and it went down the right field line and got a double. So I acted all tough, and when I was up against him, I couldn't see that ball. I could barely see this thing coming in. It was incredible. So I mean, what you were saying is 100% true. I would much rather face the righty than him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I always like I'm not much of a hitter, but I like facing righties better because I have so much more bodily security seeing the ball coming from the other side of the batter's box as a lefty, especially if you're facing somebody who's got a little bit of a lower arm angle. Feels like it starts behind your hip and then eventually crosses home plate. So that always made me a little bit nervous to stay in there, but hitting was never my forte anyway, so I don't have to worry about it too much.
So, Mike, growing up, who was your favorite team, favorite player? Did you have a favorite pitcher?
Brewers were my favorite team when I was real little because I was in Wisconsin, so not
Robin Yount.
surprisingly.
Yep.
Yeah, Yount, Paul Molitor, those were my two favorite.
Yep. Kevin Seitzer, all those guys. Yep.
Yeah. So they were the hometown team and definitely my favorites. And then when I moved to Utah, I mean, I still followed them, but it wasn't quite the same. And then as I got older, into high school years, and I started looking at baseball a little bit differently, not just, as a fan purely from a kid's perspective, but as an aspiring pitcher, I started really liking to watch left-handed pitchers of all types. But I remember in particular enjoying watching Andy Pettitte, Al Leiter.
Al Leiter. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Jimmy Key, I liked watching. Yep. You're probably sensing the theme here. Tom Glavine, of course. All these guys that did something that seemed possible, but did it well enough to make a bunch of money and play in the major league. So whatever I could try to pick up from them, I liked to watch. And, as you mentioned earlier, it was a little different back then. You watched what was on TBS or WGN or, ESPN, excuse me, Sunday Night Baseball, maybe.
I love Sunday Night Baseball. Yep.
Yeah, the options were a little more limited, but I looked for the pitching matchups more than anything. And I'm still sort of that way to this day. I like the Padres because we're here in San Diego, but a good pitching matchup to me is the most fun thing to tune in for.
It's funny because back then I would look forward to Sunday Night Baseball every week. I loved it. It was just the 90s back then. It was great. And, and I still watch baseball a lot now, but not to the extent I did as a kid. I just, something about that, I don't know what it was, something about that era or what, it was just a different vibe. And it was just the game of the week meant something, I felt back then, even more than it does today. Like that, it was, I don't know. I can't explain it to the kids of today, but like, it was just a different feel back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And, I look back and I think that whole era, I know there's, the steroid thing. And of course, a lot of people kind of down the era because of that. But you still had, I mean, Barry Bonds, even without steroids, was still a Hall of Famer. He was one of the greatest hitters I've ever seen. Ken Griffey Jr. We can go down the list of all the great guys. And then you mentioned guys like Al Leiter. I mean, I forgot about Al Leiter. He's a great pitcher. I mean, Pettit was incredible. But some of those guys you mentioned, I had forgotten about. And I mean, just those names bring back, and of course, the Mike Mussinas, and you can go on and on and on of all the guys back in that era. But what a great era of baseball. And I really think that, and today, really, the guys, I mean, there's so much talent in baseball today. And not, I feel like baseball, I want to get your take on this, because I feel like baseball has not marketed itself as well as the NFL or NBA has in the last 10, 15, 20 years. They don't have the youth as much involved. And it just seems to me that, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but my perception is they lost some of the youth fans because of not, I don't know what they could do differently, but marketing themselves in a different way. Where I feel like baseball back then, everybody my age watched baseball. Everybody played it. Everybody watched it. Nowadays, kids don't play baseball as much, at least the one, people around here, and it's more basketball, football. Do you see that? And what do you think can be done about that?
I do see it. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer either. But we we do live in a hotbed of youth baseball here in San Diego, North County, San Diego. There's a lot of good players. People like baseball. People play it more here, I think, than some other areas, but it's not as widespread as it should be. I would like to see it played everywhere. I'd like to see it played recreationally longer. I don't know if this is a problem unique to baseball, but my son has experienced this going through the Little League system. By age 12, you're pretty much hit the end of the road of what you can do recreationally. I mean, some kids continue to play a league that's sort of recreational for 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds, but not many. For the most part, by that age, it's travel teams, and which gets expensive and gets time consuming and makes kids feel like they have to be serious about it to keep doing it, which I think is too bad. I want it to be the kind of thing where, hey, it's spring, it's time to play baseball, instead of the only kids who play baseball are the kids who take it really seriously, and that's their life and that's their one sport. And I think probably with other sports, you get people who play that sport as part of their overall kind of athletic endeavors. They play football during football season, they play basketball when it's basketball season, maybe they do something else. Baseball, to me, it seems like it gets limited more quickly. A lot of little kids play Little League at the youngest levels, and then they just filter out for whatever reason. The only people who are left as kids are the kids who want to take it really seriously. And I don't know why that is exactly. I don't know if it has anything to do with the way Major League Baseball markets the sport, or if it's something to do with, the time commitment, although I don't know why that would be any different than other sports. But yeah, to me, it doesn't feel like just sort of a general, hey, all the kids in the neighborhood are going to be playing baseball because it's baseball season. And I do wish we could get back to that. And I certainly hope that these rule changes in Major League Baseball this year, which I like personally, make kids want to watch the game a little bit more, because it gets a little more exciting and they don't have to put in 3.5 hours. And maybe that sparked people to be playing it more, and kind of, starts at the lowest levels with, more interest and more long-standing interest that continues on past age 10, age 11, age 12.
Mike, I look at my nephews. I have 5 nephews, and really none of them play baseball. And I was playing baseball even after I quit, freshman year. We were playing, my friends, we would play backyard games all the time with the tennis ball. We were constantly wiffle ball, constantly playing. Even in our 20s, we had a wiffle ball league we played in. So baseball is a huge part of our lives. And it's like, I feel like our generation, I'm an older millennial, that was kind of the last of it. Like after me, it kind of started becoming more basketball, football, even soccer related. And I love all those sports, but not like, baseball to me it's sad not seeing as many youth get into it, because it's such a great sport.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I wish I had the answer. I do think that people are trying. I think, just from what I read as a fan, I have no inside knowledge on this, but it seems like this is something that Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Players Association, are aware of and want to make better. They want to get kids playing more widely, and they want to get a more diverse group of kids playing baseball too. That would be another thing that could really benefit the game, as if, we get a little more diversity in who's playing it, because that has been lacking in a way in baseball that it's not lacking in basketball and football. And again, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the problem is at the root, and I don't know what the answer to that problem is. But I hope people that are in charge of thinking hard about that question and the answer are doing it, and I think they are. So I hope they come up with something.
Agree 100%. And now you were drafted in 98 by the Twins, correct?
I was, yeah. So I was drafted out of high school.
What was that like, first of all, to be? I mean, that had to be amazing.
Yeah, it was. And looking back now, I guess I sort of take it for granted at this point, but yeah, I put myself back in the shoes of a high school kid who's about to get a chance to go play professional baseball. It's amazing when you think about it. I think I was, thankfully though, mature enough at the time to realize that while that would be cool, it was not the best long-term decision for me. That professional baseball, as long as I didn't have some sort of catastrophic injury, would be out there on the horizon, but that in the meantime, I could have a lot of fun playing college baseball, get a college education, and maybe, shave a couple of years off the minor leagues by swapping in college baseball and swapping out the lowest level of the minor league. So I didn't end up taking it. It wasn't particularly close, but it was cool. It was an honor. It is funny though, despite the fact that I was drafted, and everybody knew I was going to be drafted, I think a day or two before my senior year ended of high school. Despite that, I was still not voted most likely to become a professional athlete in my yearbook in my senior class. I literally could have been a professional athlete the next day.
That's
And yet
hilarious.
I still wasn't voted that. So
Was the person
well.
that who won that? Was it that person? Did they ever make it somewhere? Or?
It was a football player. He was a good football player. He played a little bit in college. He did not become a professional athlete though. So,
That's
but
funny.
I thought it was funny that here I would have the literal chance to turn professional, something very rare out of high school, but still couldn't get that award. But no, it was cool. Back then it was a conference call. I don't even know when I was drafted out of high school if it was broadcast on the internet. By the time I was drafted out of college, you signed on to a live stream and you would just hear a conference call and you'd wait to hear your name. I think when I was in high school, you had to call into the conference call or just sit and wait until somebody called you and said, "Hey, we were on this conference call and we heard your name." So I got drafted in the 14th round by the Twins. Didn't take it. It was an honor, but headed off to Stanford because I thought that was going to be the best way to spend my next few years, and it turned out I was right.
And take us through Stanford. What was that like, and what was your experience there?
I had a great experience there. Loved it. I chose it because I thought at the time that it was the best combination of academics and athletics in the country. I think it still is. The baseball team is top notch, but it's not all about baseball. It's not just baseball above all else. The coach there at the time and the guy who's succeeded him now definitely wants you to take advantage of everything that Stanford has to offer from an academic perspective. He expected if you had a class conflict or a conflict between class and practice, you'd go to class, which I'm sure not the way it is for a lot of coaches. And so I think that baseball players there get to play for an elite team. We were always ranked pretty much in the top 5 or 10 of the country while I was there, but also have kind of a normal college experience to the extent you can have that while spending a lot of time playing baseball. You go there, you live in a dorm your freshman year, you're paired up randomly with a roommate. It's not all the baseball guys getting together to live in a house somewhere where you don't meet anybody other than the baseball team. I'm sure that's fun at different places, but for me, I really liked being thrown right into the college mix. Worked out for me because I met my wife there, which I probably wouldn't have otherwise. But I had a great time. My coach was old school. We did everything sort of the old school way. We hadn't gotten new uniforms since the 70s, I don't think. But we showed up in our old uniforms and sprinted everywhere on the field and did it a certain way. But we won a lot of games, and so that made it all really fun. Unfortunately, we didn't win the big one. We got to the national championship game twice, but
Oh,
couldn't
you
quite
did?
pull it off. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I knew Stanford was always in it. I remember watching it back then, but I didn't realize. Okay, what was that like to go that far and lose? It had to be heartbreaking.
Well, yeah, yes, it was. So my freshman year, we made it to the College World Series, and I think lost in the semifinals. I think we finished third. I didn't pitch much that year. We had a lot of good players, but just couldn't quite get all the way. My sophomore year, I really think we were the best team in the country, and we made it to the national championship game. We had two outstanding pitchers that year. I was not one of them. Both drafted very high up, Justin Wayne and Jason Young. Neither did much in the pro game, but they were just dominant college pitchers. And we had them both ready to go for the national championship game against LSU. Wayne started, did well for about 5 innings, and then Jason Young came in, and we just didn't score many runs. And in the end, LSU walked us off in the bottom of the ninth with a weak grounder through the hole to win the national championship game. Now it's a best of 3 series for the championship. You make your way up through the bracket, and if you get to the final, you get 3 games. Back then, it wasn't that way. I really think if we'd had 3 games, we would have won it, but oh well. But we got walked off, and that was painful. And so we made it back the next year to the national championship game again with a much less celebrated team. We had, I think, probably not as many big prospects, but we played really well. And we got to the national championship game. Everybody's thinking, all right, here's our chance for redemption. I got to start that game, and I pitched very poorly. Our defense played very poorly, and we got blown out by Miami. So it was sort of anticlimactic that we'd worked all year to get back to finally sort of get vengeance on our walk-off loss from the year before, and it was never much of a game. I struggled in the first, but we had, I think, if I recall, the bases loaded, 1 out. I think I'd probably already given up a run, though, by this point. But I was close to wriggling out of it, and somebody from Miami hit a fly ball, and our right fielder lost it in the sun, and all those guys scored, and then that guy was on third, and right away you knew the wheels were already coming off. So disappointing way to end my college career, but certainly all in all, college was a really fun experience.
Well, just to play in a national championship game. I mean, how many people could say that in any sport? That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I mean, back then, again, this is before the era of much college baseball on TV, and some of the crowds that teams get these days. But so then that was the chance to be on ESPN in the College World Series. Those, all season you weren't really on TV other than maybe the local student station or a few games. But you get to the College World Series, you get to be on ESPN. The national championship game was on CBS. I mean, nationwide CBS on a Saturday. So it felt like a lot of people were watching. Who knows if they really were? And 25,000 people in the stands. And that's normally not something you get to experience unless and until you get to the major leagues. There's really not a chance to play in front of 25,000 people unless you make it to the College World Series. So that was pretty cool. I just wish it had gone better that last game.
Well, I mean, it's an experience, and I'm sure it helped you in different areas of your life. Anytime to me you go that far and you don't succeed in what you want to do, you always learn. And sometimes it's actually a better lesson than even winning, because you can learn a lot from, not achieving what you want at a certain point in your life. I've learned that in multiple ways in my life. So how did you take that experience, and move forward with your career? Because obviously you got drafted in 01 by the Diamondbacks, which ironically was the year they won the World Series. And, what was that like, getting drafted again? I mean, you probably knew you were going to, and then take us through those next couple of years of how you kind of worked your way back until your debut in 2004.
Sure. Yeah, I knew I was going to get drafted after my junior year. It was just a matter of where. So, as painful as that championship game was, I had to move on from it because it was the next chapter of my baseball existence. I knew I was going to be done with college ball at that point, and so it was a fresh start on the road to pro ball. So I got drafted. I signed with the Diamondbacks. My first experience was the Arizona Fall League that fall, which is a league down in Arizona for prospects. It's just a short little league. It's about a month and a half in the fall. And I had no idea what to expect. I knew everybody was going to be good because they're all in pro ball, and this was a league for, at least supposedly pretty good prospects. And it went okay. I held my own. I did have the good fortune, because of the timing that you just mentioned, the Diamondbacks won the World Series that year, of being in the stands for Game 7 of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when Gonzo got the walk off
Yep,
against Mariano
amazing.
Rivera. Yeah, so that was really cool. I was just there as a fan, but I happened to be, in the city for the Arizona Fall League, and thought, I can't miss a Game 7 of
No.
the World Series.
And that was right after 9/11. That was with the Yankees. It was a crazy series. I mean, for many
Crazy,
reasons.
crazy series for many reasons. Yes. And a great finish, obviously, for everybody in Arizona. So then the next year is when, reality sinks in, that you're going to start a minor league season, and it's going to be a grind, and you have no idea where you're going to be when it ends up, how well it's going to go. But I started in Double-A. So as I mentioned earlier, I was kind of hoping that my college years would be the trade for some of the lower minor leagues, and it worked out that way. I got to skip A-ball completely. So some of the worst bus rides I missed, and went right to Double-A Texas League. And I had a really good year. I was the Texas League Pitcher of the Year, and things. We had a lot of fun. We had some good players on our team. Brandon Webb, who went on to win the Cy Young a couple of
Oh
years
yeah.
later, was on that team, and one of
No
my good
kidding.
friends. Yeah. Javier Lopez, who won 4 World Series rings, including 3 with the Giants, as a
No kidding.
sidewinding lefty, was on that team. We had a lot of fun. We were young, not many responsibilities. All we had to think about really was playing baseball, and I think we capitalized on it and had a good year. And then the next year, I started out in Triple-A, which was the natural progression. And I knew pretty much from outing 1 that something wasn't right with my shoulder. I didn't know what, and I thought I could pitch through it, like a lot of guys do. And I made the dumb mistake that a 22-year-old makes, of just pushing and pushing, instead of, stepping back and thinking that I need to take some time and figure out what's going on. Because you see friends getting, I was in Triple-A, I was 1 level away. You see friends getting called up to the major leagues, and you think, I'm so close. This is not the time that I want to be on the sidelines. I want to take myself out of the options for the major league team. And so I did, and I kept pitching, but it didn't do anybody any good, because I stunk and my arm hurt. And so I went through that whole year of not really pitching well, and having basically never having a shoulder that felt good, and had surgery on my 23rd birthday at the end of the year, a torn labrum. So that was quite a
Wow.
birthday present to myself.
Wow.
Uh,
What was the recovery time like after that?
Recovery was about 6 months. And
Yeah.
so the 2004 season, I started back in Triple-A. And I was throwing, but I think with shoulder surgeries, especially, you never quite get it all back. I think elbow, you can really recover 100%. Some guys even comes back stronger now with Tommy John. I think shoulder's a little bit different. So I came back, and it was fine, but I just felt like I lost a little bit of something that even later on in my career, I never quite got back. A little bit of zip on the fastball, or just a little bit of snap on the breaking stuff. But I started out kind of rough, got better and better as the season went, and finished the year with really not particularly great numbers, but doing well enough in the second half of the season that I got my first call up at the end of that year in 2004. And so it was to a terrible Diamondbacks team. It was after a lot of the stars had left, but the one guy, or one of the couple guys who was still there, was Randy Johnson. And so I got to be in the starting rotation with Randy Johnson for a month,
Amazing.
which was really cool.
What did you
And be
learn from him?
teammates.
How is he as a teammate?
He was a great teammate. He had a reputation as being kind of a surly guy, and not particularly friendly. I think that's because he's intimidating on the mound, and because the day he's pitching, he wants to be left alone, and he wanted to get ready how he got ready. But the other days, he was a good teammate. We played golf together a few times. Actually, I hit a ball into the group in front of us one time when I was playing with him, and they turned around and seemed kind of mad, and like they wanted to have it out with us. And this was in Arizona, where of course everybody knows Randy Johnson. He said, "Oh, don't worry about it, I'll handle it." So we drove up there, and the guys were kind of motioning like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he stepped out of the car, and he said, "Hey guys, you got something like, sorry about that. You don't have a problem there. There's no problem or anything though, right?" And they're like, "Oh my gosh, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, no problem, no problem. Sorry, can we have your autograph?" So
Uh,
he smoothed that one over pretty well.
oh, that's awesome.
But he was a nice, friendly guy. I actually kind of as an aside, I wrote an article for Sports Illustrated a few years ago. It was called "The Top 9 Moments of My Completely Forgettable Major League Career."
I've actually read it. Yeah.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. It
Yeah.
was fun
Loved
to
it.
write, and I wrote it purely for myself, just to think about some of the fun times that I had, and to kind of highlight that, you can have these highlights that nobody as a casual fan would recognize as a highlight, but to you, they're very personal and meaningful. But one of the things I mentioned in there is how after striking out a batter, I came back to the dugout and Randy said, "Hey, what'd you get that guy on? What was that pitch?" And I just thought, come on, Randy John, you do not need to know what I, with my lowly stuff, struck somebody out on. Throw whatever you want. You'll strike him out. You've probably already struck him out 50 times in his career. But
I
we
mean,
chatted about it for a second, like we were peers, like we were equal, and it
that's
was
so
nice.
cool.
And he treated people that way.
I mean, Mike, that's like having Jordan say, how'd you do that turnaround jumper? OG? It's like,
Yeah,
that's
I
so
know.
cool. I mean, Randy's a legend. It's like that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a story you can tell your grandkids or anybody that, that'll never go away. And he was so, like you said, him and Pedro were the two most dominant pitchers for a while there. And everyone, I mean, I remember watching Randy back in his younger days with the Mariners when they had Griffey and all that. I mean, it was so fun watching him and how the crowd there would be just going crazy. And I think there was that game against the Yankees, that play-in game they had that one year. And I mean, it was just amazing. Like he was a bigger, larger than life figure in baseball. He was one of
yeah,
those 10 guys that everyone knew. I don't care who
yep,
you are, everyone knew Randy Johnson. So to have that
yep,
kind of guy tell you that, that's just
yeah.
so cool to me.
Yeah, it was cool. So I enjoyed being his teammate. I was sorry to see him leave at the end of that year to go to the Yankees.
Well, Mike, was
But
that the same year that he hit that bird in spring training? I think it was, wasn't it? Or around that time?
it that was actually also in 2001. That was right
Oh, it
before
was 01. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I actually just showed that video to my kids the other day because that still is just one of the most incredible things.
It is.
I
I'll
wish
never
we had
forget.
ETV back then to be able to see that. We had
Oh,
to
I
look
know.
at it in low res, but
I remember watching Sports Center. They played it over and over and over. That's
yeah,
all you could watch back then. There was no YouTube or anything, so we had to keep watching Sports Center. But I was like, I
yeah.
can't believe he hit that bird. It was, I mean, the odds of that.
The
So
odds of it, and for it to be Randy Johnson of all
I know.
people. I mean, the odds would have been crazy if it were just a no-name guy. But the most dominant, powerful, nasty, intimidating pitcher of all time is the one who just
uh,
blows up a bird. I mean, what are
uh,
the chances of that?
never forget it.
Yeah.
So going into '05 now, tell us what. I know you play for several different teams, the Reds and Blue Jays, and how did take us through those couple years, '05, '06, '07, and until your Cleveland days.
Yeah. I made the opening day lineup in '05, opening day roster with the Diamondbacks. It was the only opening day I made. That actually was really one of the more special moments in my career. I think um, people, casual fans maybe don't can't appreciate how cool it is to be out there for opening day and to kind of know that the team's starting with a fresh slate and can choose whatever roster. I mean, subject to who it has on the roster and injuries, but can choose whoever from the organization they want to represent them as part of the opening day roster. And, day one, brand new, clean season, and to make the team that year in 2005 and run out there on the foul line where the national anthem was played on opening day was really cool. Unfortunately, that was my only opening day, and that kind of segues to how those next few years went, which is a lot of ups and downs. I made the team in '05, was hoping that okay, this is it. This is going to be the start of my long, continuous, successful major league career. But everybody who ever gets called up to the major leagues hopes that too, and the reality is it's very rarely that. It's more often very bumpy, and there are ups and downs, and literal downs to AAA and literal backups to the big leagues. And I had my share of those. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If you just go through periods of struggling, it's really difficult to work it out and figure it out against the best hitters in the world. And so I just had points where I sort of lost my way a little bit, and I deserved to get sent down. I got sent down, and a number of times I was good enough to get called back up. Sometimes I was back down for a long stretch or finished out the year down, and so bounced around. But it certainly made me appreciate every day I had in the major leagues. When I was in the major leagues, from the moment I got to the ballpark until the moment I left the ballpark, I tried to enjoy every bit of it. I tried to, when guys would be sitting around in the clubhouse before the game, yes, I would do that sometimes, and it was fun to shoot the breeze. But I would also sometimes just go sit in the dugout and watch the fans start to filter in as the gates open. And try to appreciate, I'm in a major league dugout. We're getting ready to play a major league game. I'm in this uniform. I get to be a part of this game tonight. That phone might ring and I might run in and pitch in this game. And who knows who I'll face and who knows how it'll go, but it's pretty cool. Everybody else coming in here is coming in to watch as a fan, and I get to be part of this as a player. And so I try to really stop and think about that a lot. And honestly, I don't know if that's productive for a career or not. I feel like there are some guys who just put on blinders to it all and kind of never let themselves acknowledge what's happening around them. But I just don't work that way. Like my brain processes more, and so I knew I was going to be thinking about it. So I tried to fully embrace it and really enjoy every day.
I think that's the way to go. I mean, like, especially if you're someone who does how you said how your brain operates, like soaking it in, because it's something you'll never forget. And I understand the blinders thing, but to me, I mean, that to like soak in opening day and the soak in being in the dugout, watching the fans walk in, those are moments that to this day, I'm sure you'll never forget. You'll always have those vivid images, and you'll be able to tell people what it's like to be in that spot. Because again, so few people play professional sports at any level, especially when it comes to MLB, NBA, NHL, NFL. So few people ever get that experience. So you gotten to have that. And I think what you did was wise, kind of soaking it in. And I wanted to ask you this question, Mike, for people who are, especially baseball players who are sent up and down, and that happens with every team every year with dozens of players. I mean, hundreds of players. What would you tell them, looking back now in your 40s and looking back to when you were in your 20s? What would you tell those young kids, mindset and mental health wise? How do they keep themselves going during those tough times?
That's a great question. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, in professional baseball, probably professional sports. But, it's a cliche, but I think you got to take it a day at a time, because you just don't know what the next day will bring. You don't know what need might pop up at the major league level that gets you back up to the major leagues immediately when you were least expecting it. You don't know whether you're going to, have a successful run in the minor leagues or whether you're going to struggle and stay down there for a long time. You don't know whether you're going to be living in this hotel for a couple of days or, you're going to be traded and moved off somewhere else. So I think you've got to try to have a good day as much as you can each day. And whether that's a good day because you're having success in the big leagues, or whether that's a good day because you're making the most of enjoying your teammates in the minor leagues and working through your struggles and figuring something out and, going for a run before the game to clear your head, whatever it takes to try to get to the end of the day and say, I had a productive day, or I made the most of that day that I can. I think that's the way to survive it and hopefully thrive in it, because it's just difficult to look too far out in the future. There's just so many unknowns. You don't know how you're going to perform. You don't know how others are going to perform. You don't know what the team's going to need. You don't know if you're going to be traded the next day. And so if you try to look too much beyond what's right in front of you on that day, I think it just makes everything even more difficult than it already is.
That is such great advice. And going back to the Jordan documentary, just what you said, one of the guys in the documentary, I think it was his trainer or somebody, said the thing that separated, Michael from the rest of anybody really in the league wasn't the fact that he could jump, or he was athletic and he was, skilled and all that. But there's a lot of skilled players in the NBA. What separated him is that he was always 100% present in the moment, always. And they said he could just stay in the moment. He didn't think about the future, didn't worry about he just stayed right in the moment. And that is, the mindfulness aspect of it. And they were saying that when he won in the game 6 against the Jazz in 98, knowing they probably had to win that game, you don't want to go to a game 7 against Stockton Malone in Utah. So he said, we pretty much have to win this game, but he wasn't rattled, just went in there, had his headphones on, was in the moment. And he goes, that's what separated him from a lot of other guys, in that era. And I thought that was a very interesting comment.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's easier said than done for sure. I mean, gosh, the half the conversation in the minor leagues is who's doing well in the major leagues, what's happening, when they might need somebody called up. Are they going to go to a 6-man rotation here soon? If they do, who's it likely to be? Oh, so-and-so struggling. Do you think they'd ever designate him for assignment and call somebody else up? Oh, I heard there might be a trade rumor with so-and-so. I mean, you got a lot of free time in the minor leagues, in the bullpen, on the buses, on the airplane. So it's very easy to start speculating and thinking and planning when you have no control over any of it, and it's completely unproductive. And so it's hard to do. And certainly I was far from perfect at it, but to the extent you can make the most of that day in front of you, I think that's probably how you can give yourself the best chance to maximize success.
Now, 2009, when you're playing for Cleveland, at that time with the then Indians, they had almost been to a World Series a couple years before that, in 07. They really should have gotten there, in my opinion. Should have beaten Boston. We probably would have won the World Series. So they had a great team, and then of course they traded CC Sabathia, they traded Cliff, and then they started dismantling that team and building for the future. So you were kind of in the middle of that dismantling. What was that like? Did you know what was the vibe of the team at that year? Because they were kind of it wasn't like a real up year for the Tribe, but there was still some great talent on that team. What was it like for you coming in there as a younger pitcher?
It was a very talented team, like you say. So I got there a little bit into the 2009 season. CC was gone, but pretty much all the rest of the talent from that run they had a couple years earlier was still there. Victor Martinez was still there, like you mentioned. Cliff Lee was still there.
Hafner and Sizemore and all the
Sizemore was still there. Yeah. Kerry Wood was the closer at the time. He'd come in. Shin-Soo Choo was in his first year and was starting to play like a star. So there was a lot of talent. When I got there, it was definitely a sense of they were right at the point of the season where it could still go either way. That all the talent could finally start shining through, and they could make a run and get back to where they've been the last few years. But that was by no means a sure thing, because they've been struggling. I mean, the fact of the matter is I don't really get called up to a team unless somebody's struggling a little bit. As a fringe player, you're not getting called up to a dominant team that's just mowing down everybody. They don't need me. I get called up because they're trying to find the right mix, and they're trying to plug a hole with a lefty reliever that hasn't been working out. And so there were definitely some holes in the team. And I got there, and it was exciting because of the talent. It was exciting of the thought that we could get on a run here, and the Central was definitely possible. And I don't recall exactly how it went at the beginning, other than there were some ups and downs, and then all of a sudden it started trending down and started trending more down. And by the end of the year, it was enough to get Eric Wedge fired, and did not end up being a good year. But I think about the talent that was on, for example, that 04 Diamondbacks team when I got called up. I mean, that was Randy Johnson, Luis Gonzalez, and a cast of everybody else. Whereas the Indians had a lot of good players throughout the lineup, throughout the pitching staff. And yeah, I really do wish it had gone differently, because the Indians are at the time, and I think still are, a really well-run organization, and thoughtful with how they do things, and good people in the front office. And that was a good roster, and the fans by the end of the year recognized which direction it was going and weren't as engaged as they were when I first got there. But good fans, who should have been rewarded with a better team that year, and who I certainly still hope always get rewarded with good teams. I root for Cleveland. I like the Padres because I'm here in San Diego, but I root for Cleveland pretty much above everybody else, because I just think it's a good organization. It's a good fan base. Blue collar town, loves their baseball team, and deserves to have a winner. So it was fun to be there for the time I was there.
Well, you say that about the front office, and we always say in Cleveland here, the Browns are the most popular team because it's football, and people are just obsessed with the Browns. It's just always been that way. Even me. I mean, we all love football. So you have that diehard football base, and then you have, of course, LeBron was here with the Cavs, won a championship. So you have the Cavs have a huge fan base. The Tribes, the Guardians now, still has a lot of diehard fans, but they don't. I always tell people you don't realize in the last 30 years how much success they've had. They've been to 3 World Series. They've really been the best team out of all 3. I mean, you could say the Cavs because they won a championship, but outside of the championship year, it's been the Indians/Guardians have been the best team really here in this town for the past 3 decades, and they have been the best run organization. I mean, now Tito's been here for years. You got Antonetti and Chernoff, and you got a lot of great guys here, and this is probably one of the top not just best run organizations in baseball, but probably all sports. I mean, it's that well run. And if you look at the guys they get, Mike, like the young talent they bring in, they draft and they trade for, I mean, they hit it out of the park almost every time. It's incredible. All the pitching we've had here, from CC and Cliff Lee to Corey Kluber to Shane Bieber, et cetera, McKenzie now. I mean, they've had so many, 4 Cy Young Award winners, I think, in 15 or 17 years. I mean, it's incredible. So they really are a great run organization. And of course, everyone here, we hope we can see a World Series at some point. We would love that. But, when I grew up, it was the major league era when we were made fun of, and the Indians were horrible for 40 years. So to have that 90s Indians to all the way until now, kind of turn it around. And now we're a respected franchise. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the front office does not give enough credit of how truly great they are and what they've done in the past 30 years to build consistent contenders in a city that's not New York or LA or Boston or Chicago. We don't have those payrolls, and we're still, competitive almost every single year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think other organizations are probably catching up now, just based on what I read, as far as really thinking about what's best for players. From things like nutrition, and mental health, and all different aspects that used to be ignored by most organizations, but not the Indians. And that was one of the things I appreciate. I felt like back then, and it's been 14 years now or so, but they were in a place where not many other organizations were in caring about those things, thinking about those things. So many organizations, the attitude was, produce between the lines, and that's all that matters. And, we're not going to worry about how that happens. All we care about is the results and the stats. And I think that the Indians looked at their players a lot more like people than just commodities, and treated them as such. And, even Eric Wedge, as the manager, said all the time, family is the most important thing. He was, I played for him at probably the low point in his career, because he'd been on a high, and then all of a sudden we were starting to really struggle, and it was clear that he was probably going to lose his job, and he did shortly before that season ended. And yet he still treated everybody with respect. He still did things the right way. He still, I think, had his priorities right. And I don't think that was an accident, being part of the Indians or Indian organization that had that attitude from the top down.
I mean, that's such good things to hear, especially with Eric Wedge. And, I remember, because he did have a nice run here, especially 07. I still think we should have won that World Series. I'll never not think that. You wonder how it would have went if we did win that World Series. I mean, it would have been probably a little bit different moving forward, but it happens how it happens. But yeah, we look recently, just last year, Jose Ramirez signed a long-term contract and really gave up a lot of money on the open market to stay here for 7 years. And that shows you how some of these guys view the franchise. So I appreciate you saying that, someone who's actually played for the franchise, to come out and say that, because I think here in Cleveland, there's people that know it, of course, but it's so overshadowed that people, I don't think they appreciate being, competitive every year. I mean, almost every year they're competitive, and that's just in baseball, especially when you're not a big market team. That's tough to do,
Yeah.
in and out. Even the Royals, they won the World Series in 15, and they really haven't been very competitive since. So
Right.
the Guardians / Indians have been competitive for, pretty much for a long time now, for a consistent amount of years. So that goes a long way. And I love how they do focus on the mental health and other things like that. That's so important. And it's the wave of the future. I mean, we're not going backwards anymore. That's going to be what is, I think eventually all sports are going to realize that if you're not mentally healthy and you're not emotionally healthy, how are you going to perform at a high level? It's not going to happen. People kind of wrote that off years ago, but that's just not, you have to be at a certain level. And if you're not at that level, you got to get help then.
Yep, for sure.
So Mike, a couple more questions for you. And again, I thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
My pleasure.
Looking back at your career, it could be college, high school, major leagues. What is your favorite moment?
Favorite moment? Well, I think it would have to be probably my first major league win, which was in St. Louis. This is another thing that I wrote about in my article. Kind of my one or two true, on the field highlights that I think even like the casual fan can understand. Because it was in 2004, it was that first month when I got called up, and it was against a really great Cardinals team in St. Louis. you talk about good fan bases and cool places to play. That was Old Bush Stadium, packed entirely. The Cardinals were set to clinch the division that day if they'd won. It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon in St. Louis. A lineup with Jim Edmonds, Albert Pujols, everybody that team had at that point. And I got to start and pitch pretty well. And the bullpen held it up. We were a bad team, but we beat the Cardinals to postpone their coronation of their NL Central championship, which they of course got a lot of. So, but for that day, that afternoon, that was our moment, and I got to have a big piece in that. So I think just the satisfaction of knowing when that game was over that I'd had a good game, and that whatever else happened in my career, I had one major league victory to my name at least, and it was a pretty cool way to get it. It wasn't that I just came in and got one out and we happened to score at the right time, but I actually got it by starting the game and going through a difficult lineup on the road. And so I would say probably that, but there were so many different moments that were sort of small but special in their own way. I mean, I think for just kind of a average middle reliever like I was, I still remember to this day a game for the Indians where I came in to face, we were playing the Twins, and I came in to face Joe Mauer and Justin Morneau, because I was a lefty, and I mean, two of the best left-handed hitters in baseball, back to back in the lineup. So you got to bring a lefty in to face him, and the lefty's got to get him out if that's his job. And I came in and I got Mauer to hit a really weak ground ball for an out, and then I struck out Morneau, and that ended the inning. And that was my whole outing. And it's just such a nondescript outing for most people. 162 games that can easily get lost in the shuffle. But I just remember the feeling of satisfaction coming out and thinking, I was brought in to face two really, really good lefties. Mauer hit 390 or something, whatever that year. Yeah. And I did my job and I got them both out, and I struck out Morneau, and then I got to walk off the mound with that feeling of satisfaction. So, I mean, that I wouldn't peg that as like my highlight in my career, but it's just something that when I think back on kind of those moments of, wow, I did that, even something like that comes to mind. So I try to appreciate all of them.
That's a cool moment. Those two guys are incredible, by the way. I forgot about Joe Mauer. Wow.
Yeah.
Mauer was a heck of a hitter.
Yeah.
Looking back now at your whole career, whole life, 30 years from now, let's say you're on a beach somewhere, you're retired, you're having a good time, you're looking back at your life. What do you want people to know about the legacy of Mike Gosling?
Oh boy, that's a big question. Well, I'm a lawyer now, and so I'm not involved in baseball. And I guess first and foremost, I want people to remember me for a lot of things other than just baseball. I really love the fact that I played professional baseball. I'm very proud of it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I met a lot of guys who defined themselves completely by the fact that they were baseball players. And then when they were no longer a baseball player, they didn't know how to define themselves. And it's tough. Leaving baseball is tough for anybody. No matter how prepared you think you are, you're not. Whether you're a Hall of Famer or a guy who played one game in the major leagues, you always want more time. You always think you could have done more. So that is difficult. But I think I love that I was a baseball player, but that's not all I was. And so a question that big, I would probably go back to the basics. Good dad, good husband, good son, good brother, good person who was able to do some pretty cool things, was able to, play college baseball at a good school on a good team, was able to play in the major leagues, was able to transition from baseball into what so far, at least, I think has been a successful legal career and will hopefully continue to be, was able to be around at home with family, and just had a diverse set of experiences, baseball being one of them. So I think that would be probably my overarching goal for when people think of me someday.
Mike, I ask everybody that question, and most people say the same thing. They want to be known more what happened outside their sport rather than inside. So it's always a good answer. Last question before you go, and I have to ask you this. Yeah. Best hitter you ever faced, and what was the outcome?
Albert Pujols, in that game that I was just talking about, my one win. Yeah, well, not my one win, but my first win. So the first at bat, first inning, of course I remember all this because you don't forget when you face Albert Pujols. They had a guy on third, and it may have even been Tony Womack, who was lightning fast. I think he was the guy on third.
Yep.
And one out, and Pujols came up and hit a pop up into pretty shallow left field, a fly ball. And our left fielder caught it, and I guess Womack thought he was fast enough to tag from there, and our left fielder threw him out at home to get me out of the first inning. No runs scored. So technically, I got Pujols to hit into a double play, unconventional double play. But again, that was one of those moments walking off the mound thinking, oh my gosh, I just got Albert Pujols out. This is crazy. Because, even then, he was at the pinnacle, and he carried it on. But even in 2004, everybody knew who he was and what he was.
Oh, yeah.
So that was great. But then he hit 2 doubles off me as next to at-bats.
So, the best of both worlds. You got to say he had a couple doubles off you, and you got to say an unconventional double play.
Yeah, and one of them probably was never more than 8 feet off the ground, and yet hit the wall on the fly. So it was an absolute missile. But he just by pure career and dominance, best player. He was 2 for 3 off me, so he's obviously did just fine. But there were a few other guys who sort of no names, but who just I couldn't get out, and it's just you never know exactly why it's going to be that way. Miguel Cabrera, on the other hand, I had pretty good numbers against, even though he's a big righty who you'd think would own a lefty like me, just eat me alive. I was okay against him. Todd Helton, who was really good for the Rockies in my era, especially in Coors Field.
He was a stud. Yep.
I had good numbers against. On the other hand, Alfonso Soriano just absolutely owned me. So who knows? But as far as just this guy is in the box, and I'm not sure what I can possibly throw to this person to get him out, Albert Pujols would be top of the list.
That's about as good as it gets right there. I think he came in the league in 2001 and was dominant from pretty much day one.
Yeah.
He was a total stud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for joining me. This has been so cool to talk to you and to hear about your ups and downs in your career and making it to the majors and everything you've done. Again, not many people have made it to where you have, and I think it's just an incredible journey, and it's good for the audience to hear what you overcame and the ups and downs that you faced. And I think that's so important, because I think in my audience, I've noticed a lot of people like hearing more about the failures, so to speak, more than even the successes, because people want to know, how did you persevere? How did you get through it? That's more important to people. Anybody can win, and you see, when you win, and you win, but when you're not, how do you get through it? And I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us, and especially getting through your injury. It's just been fascinating. So thank you again for joining, and you're welcome back anytime.
Hey, my pleasure. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks to Brett for thinking of the idea.
Absolutely. Shout out to Mooch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be back out there pitching to him. Not very well, but pitching to him one of these days here soon. So
you got to give him a little crap from me. Tell him we'll mess with him a little bit, but I love Mooch. I
will. I'll bounce a couple extra for you. So yes, to get
please do. Yeah, make it difficult for him. Yeah. Exactly. All right, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Okay, have a good one. Okay.